So, when you think about who really built America, who comes to mind? Is it the famous founders, the presidents, maybe those big shot industrialists? Well, what if I told you the real story is written not in headlines, but in the calloused hands and unwavering spirits of millions of people we often forget? Today, we're diving into the story of Eastern European immigrants, the true, unsung builders of modern America. So let's kick things off with a pretty huge question, right? How do you actually build a country? I mean, is it all about grand declarations and political treaties, or is it something a little more down to earth? Well, the answer, the one that really gets to the heart of it, is this. You build it with bare hands and unbreakable hope. You build it with ordinary people who are willing to risk absolutely everything for a dream. And that is the story we're unpacking today. All right, so our story really kicks off with this constant push and pull, this tension that defined an entire generation, the incredible promise of a new life weighed against the very, very real danger of leaving everything you've ever known behind. You have to ask, what would make someone leave everything they've ever known? Well, the reasons were just staggering. We're talking about crushing poverty, the constant threat of war looming over their heads, and for so many, just brutal religious persecution. Back home, the chance of owning your own land or finding a good job was practically zero. So leaving wasn't just a choice. For millions, it was the only choice. And this quote, man, it just perfectly captures the sheer guts it took. Can you imagine packing up your entire life, saying goodbye to your family, your friends, and crossing a massive ocean with basically nothing but the clothes on your back and this powerful, desperate dream for something better? So after this absolutely brutal journey, they finally see land. But that first step onto American soil, it wasn't the end of the road. Not even close. It was the beginning of a whole new world of fear and uncertainty. And it all started in the intimidating halls of Ellis Island. And that's the thing you've got to understand. Getting here wasn't freedom. It was just the start of a whole new gauntlet. The physical journey might have been over, but the emotional one, the bureaucratic one, that was just getting started. Just look at the hurdles they had to clear at Ellis Island. It wasn't just a quick passport stamp. First, you had the long, anxious wait, crammed into these massive halls. Then came the dreaded medical exam, where a simple cough could get you sent right back. On top of all that, most people couldn't speak the language, and hanging over everything was this constant, terrifying fear of being deported. This really sums up the emotional roller coaster, doesn't it? On one side, you have this incredible, life-changing hope. The promise of America is right there. But on the other, you have this crushing anxiety, the long inspections, the very real terror of being separated from your family, or being told you have to go all the way back. Okay, so for the ones who actually made it through that whole ordeal, what came next? Well, it was time to work. And I mean work. They had to build a life from absolute scratch, and that meant stepping right into the crucible of American labor. And we're not talking about easy jobs. They went straight into the belly of the beast, the industries that were physically building this country. They were pouring steel in the scorching mills of Pennsylvania, running the looms in textile factories, laying down thousands of miles of railroad track, and building the very skyscrapers that now define our cities. You know, this chart might look simple, but it tells you pretty much everything you need to know about their lives. A 6-day work week was just normal. That left one day for rest, for family, for everything. Life was just a relentless cycle of work, sleep, and do it all over again. And those work days, they weren't your typical 9 to 5. We're talking 10, 12, sometimes even 14 hours a day, often in really dangerous conditions with tough supervisors, all for incredibly low pay. This was the price they paid to build a new life. And here we are again, with that massive gap between the dream and the day-to-day grind. The dream was all about freedom, opportunity, maybe having a home of your own one day. The reality? Grueling 12-hour shifts, dangerous jobs, and living in crowded, often dirty tenement buildings. So you've got to wonder, how in the world did they survive this? Well, it wasn't just about being tough. Survival came down to two things: incredible personal endurance, for sure, but also solidarity. Relying on each other, family, friends, people from your old village. That's how you got through it. And that idea of solidarity brings us to something absolutely crucial. When you're facing all of this hardship in a strange new country, how do you hold on to who you are? This is all about how their culture became their anchor in a world that was often trying to wash them away. Because, and let's be real here, it wasn't like they arrived to a big welcome party. They were often called foreigners, undesirables. They were paid less for doing the exact same job as native-born workers. They faced prejudice everywhere they went. They had to prove themselves every single day. Yeah, this quote just nails it, doesn't it? Culture became both shield and anchor. Faced with all that hostility, their culture wasn't just a memory, it was a tool for survival. It was a shield that protected their spirit and an anchor that kept them from drifting away. So what was that anchor actually made of? Well, it was all of this. Their religious traditions kept their faith strong. Cultural festivals brought moments of pure joy and connection to home. Family bonds were, well, they were everything. And they even created their own support groups to help new arrivals find their feet. These were the pillars that held their entire community together. Okay, so after all that struggle, all that hard work, what did it all lead to? Let's talk about the incredible legacy they left behind. A journey that went from just trying to survive to achieving a level of success that literally reshaped America. This timeline does a great job of showing how this wasn't an overnight thing. It was a journey across generations. It started with just arrival and survival. Then they started building communities from the ground up. By the middle of the century, their kids, the second generation, were really starting to thrive, getting educated and moving into the middle class. And today, their influence is just woven into everything we see in modern America. And you gotta remember, we're not just talking about ideas here. Their contributions were real. They were physical. Their backbreaking labor, their incredible courage, their tight-knit families, they literally built entire neighborhoods, whole cities, and the very industries that made this country an economic powerhouse. When you boil it all down, their story is really one of incredible sacrifice. Their struggle wasn't just for them. It was an investment. They put up with so much so that their children and their children's children could have the kind of opportunities they could only dream of. So no, their story isn't some minor detail in a history book. It's a foundational chapter written into the very steel and brick and spirit of America. And that kind of leaves us with a final question to think about. What forgotten histories are built into the world right around you?